Welcome. I'm Glenn Anderson with the Olympia Fellowship of Reconciliation. This TV series explores a variety of issues that relate to peace, social justice, and nonviolent social change. I've lived in this local community since January 1975, and to me, the isthmus that connects downtown Olympia and West Olympia has always seemed to be a waste when office buildings clog its natural beauty and the natural space. The location has just been crying out to be a public park. Located between Capitol Lake and Bud Inlet, the southernmost tip of Puget Sound, with views of the state capitol building and the Olympic Mountains, Olympia's Isthmus would be a natural place for people to gather and enjoy the beauty and build our sense of community. The Isthmus has always felt to me that it has wanted to be a natural gathering place for our community, a public park that we could all enjoy. Fortunately, our community includes a lot of people who believe, as I do, and are actually working to bring this dream into reality. The Olympia Capitol Park Foundation is working for exactly that. This month's TV program focuses on that, and we have 3 members of the board of the Olympia Capitol Park Foundation. I'm happy to welcome our 3 guests, Jerry Riley, Sarah Siegel, and Bob Jacobs. Good to have you all here.
Thank you.
We will explore this topic, and I hope that the viewers will be as enthusiastic about this as the 4 of us are. Jerry, let's start the conversation by looking at the area that we're talking about. We've got a photo showing the location with the current buildings, and then we'll look after that at another photo without those buildings, another image. Tell us about the 2 images. We have over here.
Well, the first image we're going to look at is the Isthmus area as it exists today, with the Capitol Center building in the center of it, which is a 9-story building that was constructed in 1965 and has come to be known by many people in the community as the mistake by the lake. The second image we're going to see would show us what this area would look like if the Capitol Center building were removed.
Okay, and the areas that we're talking about are a park that would extend from the Heritage Park fountain, which is between 4th and 5th Avenues, and then the bridges on 4th and 5th Avenue. So that area west, not including the building that has Traditions Cafe in it, but it's Heritage Fountain and to the west, and between 4th and 5th.
We're talking about the area between the Heritage Fountain and the Deschutes Spillway, and between 4th and 5th. Yeah. And in the next image, you can see what the area would look like with the Capitol Center building and most of the other buildings removed from that area.
Okay. We've had a controversy in this community recently about a proposal to build 90-foot tall condominiums and commercial buildings on the Isthmus. City Council had decided to rezone the area to allow that, and then the community and the voters responded by replacing some of those city council members. What else can you tell us about that ill-fated proposal in the context of the potential?
Well, in 2008, a proposal was laid in front of the city to create high-rise condominiums on the Isthmus, approximately at the same size of the Capitol Center building, but at much greater mass, to really completely fill the 2 blocks west of the Capitol Center to the Deschutes spillway. This is not the first time an idea had been proposed similar to that, and there were a lot of people in the community concerned. About 7 people came together one morning in the Bud Bay Cafe who were all former members of the Olympia Planning Commission and said, we're concerned about this, what can we do? But rather than simply say, well, we're going to oppose the high-rise condominiums as being inappropriate for that space, we said, let's come up with a permanent solution and a better solution, which is to be for something. And what we were for was the idea of creating a great civic space on the Isthmus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's, like I said at the introduction of the program, that just always seemed like that's what that space is crying out to be, is because of the beautiful setting there. And there had been other proposals to build there before?
Yes, there had been earlier proposals, and generally the community would rise up and say, we don't think this is a good idea, and the city council concurred with that point of view, and the proposals never went forward. What was different this time is it appeared that a majority of the council seemed very firm in their belief that this was the right thing to do. And they thought it was important to do this to get housing, market rate housing in downtown Olympia to help downtown. What happened here was under the leadership of the Friends of the Waterfront and later the Isthmus Park Association, a petition drive was organized and gathered 5,000 signatures in about a month, beginning in August of 2008, that asked the city council to do a careful feasibility study of whether a park could be created. This was the first successful initiative drive such as this since the early 50s, when a drive was done to create and save the Watershed Park and Sylvester Park. The city council accepted that initiative and contracted for the feasibility study that came back and said, yes, it was feasible to do this, provided the city, the community, and the state came into alignment.
Okay, and I know you folks are working on that to move this forward. We should think about that space in light of the overall vision of the people who had designed our state capitol campus, the Capitol building and the nearby buildings. Bob, can you talk to us about the vision that Wilder and White had almost a century ago in the early 1900s when they were designing the Capitol building?
It's exactly a century ago. We just celebrated the centennial of,
that's right, yes.
of the contract being let. Actually, it goes back farther than that to Edmund Sylvester, one of the founders of Olympia, who donated 12 acres where the Capitol is today and called it Capitol Place. Okay. This is before we were even a state, and he had that much foresight to say, this is going to be a state, that's going to be the Capitol, and it's because it's on a promontory that looks down over this hill to the water. And by the way, off to the east, you can see Mount Rainier too.
Yeah.
So that's where it came from. And when Wilder and White won that design contest 100 years ago, it incorporated that connection down to the water, a great park, which we finally finished, Heritage Park, reflecting pool, which we now call Capitol Lake, on out. And this would essentially be an elaboration of that original plan.
Yeah, another step forward,
yeah,
stemming from that original vision.
Right.
The view from the Capitol building and the view of the Capitol building from elsewhere just seems to be unique. And I know you and I had talked on the phone about some aspects of it, and maybe others have a sense of the uniqueness of this view.
We think it's one of the great vistas in America. You looking down from the law enforcement memorial that was sited on that site, particularly because of the great location. You're looking out across the Isthmus, onto the waters of Puget Sound, out to the Olympic Mountains. Mm-hmm. And we don't see it every day, but when we do see it, it is one of the magnificent places in America. and except for the blemish in the middle of it, which is our 9-story building that was built in 1965.
Well, that view has been celebrated even in public art as early as 2004 when the 4th Avenue Bridge was built. There is a series of art projects in that bridge, if you walk the bridge, and I urge people to do that, that celebrate the connection between the Capitol and the natural vista. There are mosaics that go from, I believe it's called the laws of man to the laws of nature, that we constantly in Olympia celebrate that view and that connection between the Capitol and the natural setting.
Yeah, and one of you had told me on the phone when we were preparing for the program that that from the Capitol 2 national parks are visible, Mount Rainier off to the east and then up to the north, the Olympic. And that's possibly unique in the nation.
Oh, it definitely is unique. There's no other state capital, to my knowledge, that can observe even one national park, but you can observe 2 national parks from our capital. And there's a concept in landscape architecture called borrowing from the natural environment. And clearly our capital is, somebody coined the phrase the other night at the centennial celebration saying this is the Mona Lisa of state capitals. Because it just is such a unique natural setting that we have an opportunity now to, what we say is protect it and perfect it by creating this great civic space on the Isthmus.
People talk informally about an Isthmus Park, but the name that you're working with is Capitol Olympic Vista Park, so trying to pull together some of these aspects. Is there anything else we need to say about that name?
Well, people in Olympia know what the Isthmus is, but we see this as a regional, statewide, and even national asset. And as we go into significant fundraising to complete this vision, we thought we needed a name for it that would tell people what it is. And it is the vista from our capital to the Olympic Mountains. And that concept is something that people who are outside of Olympia can relate to. Everybody here understands what the Isthmus is immediately, but people in Wenatchee or people in San Francisco don't understand it. But they can understand this concept, and that's why we've begun to refocus.
Yeah. One of you had told me, or maybe it was on the website, that the city of Olympia, in their looking ahead to what they want to do with parks, they're allowing for this in the current plan for what they have in mind for the future for parks. Is that right?
That's right. It is in the current parks plan as a project that the community is very interested in, has shown a lot of support in. No funding sources identified, but it's in there.
Okay.
And that kind of gave the green light to the staff to go ahead and start working toward this.
Yeah. So it's not like some rogue vision that's outside of the mainstream or anything. It's
well, it began as a bit of a rogue vision, but it has become
mainstream,
fairly mainstream at this point. And we were fortunate in many, many ways that this park plan was being developed at the same time this was happening, and we were able to dovetail those two. So when the new edition of the parks plan came out, the Isthmus Park was in it.
Yeah, and you've been cooperating really well with the city, and you are cooperating with other entities to move this project ahead. So it's not coming in from left field.
Well, taking you back to the feasibility study, the people who did that study said that this is very feasible, provided that the community, the city, and the state come into alignment and work cooperatively. And that's been our method of operation from the outset, that we're not against anything, we're not against anybody, we are for the creation of this great civic space. And we now get great cooperation from the city. We've gotten great cooperation from parts of the state government. Senator Fraser has been a great supporter, Representative Hunt, Representative Reichdahl, our local delegation, have been very supportive of our efforts.
Yeah, and this really flows from the achievement you have with Heritage Park, which right there on 5th and Water and around, where people had struggled for a long time to get that right, and it finally seems to be working right, and it's used, and it's beautiful.
It's so right that when I tell people what was there before, they typically refuse to believe me.
Uh-huh.
I mean, people who have come to town in the last 10 or 15 years after it was done.
Yeah.
You tell them that was a mass of old railroad sidings down there, and they just don't want to believe it.
Right.
It was so wrong.
Yeah.
And what's there is so right.
Right.
And go out on any sunny day and look at all the people using it.
Oh, yeah,
It's just
yeah.
amazing.
And the state and the city have invested an enormous amount to create Heritage Park. It's about $17 million has gone into that over the years. The city developed the fountain block with cooperation from some important philanthropy. The state has done the part of Heritage Park across 4th Avenue, and it's been enormously successful.
Yeah, and so what that does is that comes up to 5th Avenue.
5th, excuse me, you're correct.
And then going across 5th to the fountain and then to the west as far as the chute spillway, then that's the area, and that would be just a natural blending. It would be a natural extension, given all given the site, you know, and given the cooperation that's gone into this. It seems like a real natural.
And it connects on from there to Percival Landing. And Percival Landing is part of a bigger vision for the whole waterfront, which has been adopted by the county in the county parks plan. It's called the Big W. Imagine a walking space from Priest Point Park all the way down East Bay and out around the peninsula and out to the end of West Bay.
Oh,
it's shaped like a big W.
Yeah.
And that, too, is in the plan and is mostly in place, actually. Between sidewalks and port trails and Percival Landing, there are just a few more pieces to put together.
Yeah,
and that, too, has been a dream for a long time in this community.
Sarah, you have a lot of passion for those kinds of projects.
Well, we've not mentioned Percival Landing.
Yeah.
The reopening happens August 25th, and there seems to be a renaissance, if you will, in Olympia of with Percival's opening, with art projects. Percival will have many public art. We have 22 display stands that are going to be displaying statues for the grand opening. We just really do have a lot of assets, and this park will complement what we already have. And just be a good addition to our.
And each part of this has its own unique character and appearance and function. Can you tell us something about that?
Correct. Well, when you start at Priest Point Park, the new one, you know, it's very open. You have this fabulous view of the Capitol, and you go around, like Bob referenced, the Big W. We have the Park of the Seven Oars. That is actually not on the park. It's not a city park. It's a city art project. And if anyone has never been there, it's just fabulous.
It's on the lower west side near the roundabout.
Near the roundabout.
Yeah.
And that whole area from the upper roundabout down to the bridge is an art installation. And I'm very excited about the Isthmus Park, or the Capitol Olympic Vista Park, if you will, as being another opportunity to showcase Olympia's wealth of artists, and we have a real passion for art in Olympia.
Well, there's a lot of arts community that some people might not be aware of, but it's really a big part of the local economy, the local culture, and brings people to Olympia and gives local Olympia people some identity and some good opportunities to do some work.
Within the past year, the Percival area itself has been recognized by the American Planning Association as one of the great public places in America. And sometimes you don't necessarily realize the great jewels you have in your own community because we take them for granted. But when people look at it from a national perspective, they see how important Percival is. And this will be the crown jewel of the jewels to perfect this area.
Yeah, because it's the one gap that's missing. It's the couple blocks of blight in amidst all this other beauty and community functionality, community gathering places,
Exactly.
except for a couple blocks of blight. We should talk just a moment about the 9-story tall piece of blight that you've already referred to as the mistake by the lake, and that's what everybody calls it. It was built in 1965, you said. Could somebody tell us some more about that? It was an office building for many years, but it's been vacant for a long time now.
I've tried to research the history and I've been unsuccessful, and perhaps somebody in the audience can help us with this, of what people thought when it came about. It came about in '65, apparently not amid a lot of controversy. There had to be a little bit of a zoning exception to allow a few higher floors than would have been permitted by the zoning. And I think people at the time thought it was a good thing. And it was a brand new building and it was occupied for many years. The most recent tenant was the state of Washington and the Department of Corrections. They moved out 4 or 5 years ago. The building has essentially been vacant since then. The owners have made some internal renovations, basically removing things from the building to get it ready for its next use, but they've been unsuccessful in finding an appropriate next use. And as you know, the state is going through a consolidation right now, and there doesn't appear to be any likely state government tenant there for the foreseeable future. So that building has been slowly deteriorating, and this is probably the best time ever to make the decision to acquire it and to demolish it.
Yeah. And the next couple buildings over to the west, one was the old county health department, and some other buildings that have also been vacant for
Housing
years
Authority,
and are run down.
Health Department, and they were acquired by Triway Enterprise, or the Triway Company, and this was part of their putting together the land to do the project that they proposed to do. They have since run into some tough times with the economic situation, and in fact, those properties were scheduled to go into foreclosure about 6 months ago, and then the company went into bankruptcy, and that stopped the foreclosure. So they have had financial, very, very rough patch, and if it was ever feasible to develop them into high-end, high-rise condominiums, it is not now.
Yeah. It seems like this would be the right time to clear all of that out and do something productive that the community wants, that would fulfill the vision that we've been talking about. I mean, it seemed like the right time to move ahead.
Well, speaking of timing, the city in, I believe, early August started looking at designating community renewal areas where they could identify areas, either large or smaller individual areas that have blight, derelict buildings and unoccupied buildings, and start addressing some of the planning to address those.
Yeah, so that would be a natural, in that context.
Yeah, it all fits.
The city's new concern about blight. What are some possibilities? I know various people have different visions about what that area could be, and your sense is kind of first things first. Let's get this started. Can you talk about the first things first approach, and then also some of the creative solutions?
Jerry likes to call it down and green. I think that's it. The first step, and what we're trying to do now, is acquire these lands and buildings, take down the buildings, do the necessary environmental cleanup, and construct a very basic park, just grass and benches and lights kind of thing, very much like Heritage Park. And that is kind of a blank canvas then for the community at some later time to decide what it ultimately wants there. And we have had dozens of suggestions. A lot of people want a carousel. A lot of people want a longhouse, various kinds of water features, maybe another fountain like the one that's so popular down there now. But that is for a future time. That is not what we are doing now, and that needs to be decided by the community with complete cooperation and involvement of the whole community.
So the first task is to create that blank canvas
Yep.
where the community can then later paint in what they need, but get the blight out of there now, get some ownership, and you're looking at preferably city ownership, and I know there's cooperation with other
Well,
entities.
there are several options that come to mind. One is the foundation could be an ownership, but that would probably, our foundation.
The foundation, the nonprofit group that you folks work
Right,
with.
but that would probably be an interim step designed to facilitate transition to either city or state ownership for the long term. And the key thing is that it has to be in some form of ownership that is dedicated to open spaces. And tied into that is we've recently received a Conservation Futures Award from Thurston County for $600,000 to help with land acquisition. But one of the conditions of that grant will be that it has to be in a permanent open space or civic space environment. And probably the best way for that to happen is for some public ownership. Although we do have the Deschutes Falls Park, which has been owned and operated successfully by a foundation for 50 years. But that would not probably be our first choice.
Yeah. So it sounds like there are several pieces that have to fit in to transition the ownership, to clear out after the bankruptcy of that one company, and a number of things. But the moving toward a city, then you need to have the ownership or the processes in ways that you can attract other funding. You're looking
Right.
at other foundations.
We started 3 years ago, in August, and every day for those 3 years we've gotten closer to the goal. Every day we've been closer, and we're closer now than we've ever been to making this happen. But there's still many, many steps that have to proceed, and you've pretty much outlined them. First, get control of the property, then design what you're going to do, and raising the resources is a significant issue that runs right through this.
Right.
And we have small fundraising efforts that we've conducted for the past 2 years, mostly for the purpose of managing the process of going forward. And we are working with other partners. The Trust for Public Land, which is one of the nation's largest public land trust organizations, has become a very active partner with us and are very interested in this project. And they bring enormous regional and national resources to the table. So working with them in partnership with the city and our local private philanthropy, and at some stage we need to involve the state of Washington, because they have a huge stake in this being successful, because they, being the caretakers of the Capitol campus, I think have a fundamental, should have a fundamental interest in completing this vision.
Yeah, as they did with Heritage Park. I mean,
As the state has been magnificent
big
with
player.
Heritage Park,
Yeah.
but it doesn't happen that quickly, and right now is a real tough time for the state. But we have to take the longer view and look beyond the short term and get ready for when the environment is better.
So you have enough work to do to secure the title and get the buildings down and do all of that stuff, and it makes perfect sense that the phase 2 about what actually do we want to have in this park once it's down and green.
Yeah.
That's.
But I expect we're
You can
going to.
defer
I
that
think
for-
we're going to need some state help in even the first phase, because when you're looking at the Capitol Center building, that's a significant effort to acquire and take down.
Yeah.
And that interim stage, that green space is going to be very useful too.
Oh,
I mean,
it's
you
not
can
like
imagine,
Heritage Park, you know.
like
I mean,
Heritage Park, the
to get
public events.
Just to get those buildings out of the way and have a space where people can be and enjoy the views and enjoy some green would be good. But it is exciting to, I know you're engaging the public and trying to think creatively about what would you like to see here, because there are a lot of possibilities, and that would be a fun thing to sort of be tantalizing folks to help generate some energy to get this first part of your work done. Let's see, do we have one of the things that you had said, Sarah, was we need to make sure that whatever you do, we don't have short-sighted decisions, short-sighted like the 9-story tall mistake by the lake, or other, like the tall rezoning would have been just lately.
Correct. When we don't do good planning and long-range planning and look beyond just the block or the building that we're focused on now, we get mistakes by the lake. And this, I think, is just an excellent opportunity to engage the public and to look at the whole of downtown and Heritage Park and how this all fits in and complements what we have.
Yeah, you told me on the phone when we were preparing for the program that the Capitol view and that setting was built in very significantly into the 4th Avenue Bridge design.
Right, I mentioned that earlier in the artwork there. And the Arts Commission actually sponsors public art tours. This year, it normally goes on Percival Landing, but this year with the reconstruction of Percival Landing, they've taken the tour on the bridge. And so from July through September, on Saturday mornings at 11, they will do a free art tour. And it's a perfect opportunity to see some really exciting Olympia public art, but to also walk from beautiful spaces next to the blighted areas and then on to beautiful spaces. And you really get a sense of what could be on the Isthmus when you're actually on the street and looking. It's something that everyone should, even if they don't take the tour, just go down and walk the property.
Well, anything that'll help stimulate people's creative thinking as to what could be a vision for this.
Right, you stand there and you look and you see, what would I like to see there?
Right, because from the bridge you can see from another angle, because most of us see it from on 4th or you see it from 5th, but if you get up or if you get any different perspective, you know.
That reminds me of the story that Ralph Monroe, our former Secretary of State, tells, and he is a great champion of the park, and he will go back and tell you how his grandfather worked on the building. It was a stonemason and worked on the creation of the Capitol, but that his grandfather always said, you don't really appreciate the magnificence of the Olympia Capitol until you approach it by water. And as you approach it by water, you know, roundy Doppelmayr Point coming down Butt Inlet, getting closer and closer, then you see the magnificence of this Capitol with these many buildings designed to look like one. But now, when you approach it, when you get close to it, you can no longer see it because of the 9-story building. So Ralph tells that story and in a very passionate way about the vision that his grandfather had.
That would be an interesting fundraising opportunity to for your cause, would be to find somebody with a nice big boat and have people pay to take a ride and come in and then envision approaching Olympia without that building there. People would pay for that.
One other thing that, reflecting back on the original idea for the housing, some people have argued that the folks who want this great civic park are somehow opposed to downtown housing, and that's absolutely not true. We would love to see a variety of downtown housing for all income levels, and we think our downtown is a magnificent resource and it needs housing, but not here. There are other great locations that have 90% of the amenities, but not the problems that this site has. This is just the absolute wrong place to put housing. Not to belabor that, but I just want to be real clear that we are very much in favor of housing downtown.
Yeah, I think it might be good. That's a good point to make. It also might be good at this point to dispel any concern people might have about this project taking a view one side or the other about Capitol Lake versus an estuary, because some people in the community want to make Capitol Lake a better human-made lake, and other people want to make it a natural estuary, and your efforts don't prejudge that, and your efforts could actually work either way, is my understanding.
Exactly.
So you're not, the efforts that you're working on need not be hung up by the controversy about Capitol Lake versus an estuary?
Now, the isthmus will continue to exist. It would have a different configuration if you opened up the aperture because you had an estuary, but essentially the Isthmus Park, or the Capitol Olympic Vista Park, could work well with the lake and could work well with an estuary. And I have to tell you that we have people on our board who are strongly in support of both of those options. So we do not have a position on that, nor do we need to.
Well, it's good that you have a focus. You know what you're about, and I'm confident you're going to make that succeed. When we were talking on the phone, Sarah, you said that some people say, well, don't we have enough parks already? We should discuss that as well.
I hear a lot of, why do we need more green and park benches, which is what our first phase is. I invite them to participate in the public process for phase 2 and make the park be, a park doesn't necessarily have to be static. I have my own visions for this, and I envision a very active, interactive public space. We do have a lot of parks, and that's a good thing. We need to keep the waterfront open, and this one will complement what we have. I'd feel that we can't have enough parks myself. I mean, it's good to have public spaces. And this is an opportunity for the people who don't want to see just another green grassy area at phase 2 to join in the conversation and tell us what you'd like to see there.
Right, and I appreciate your sense that each of these parks or each of these areas has its own distinct value, activity, character, and so it will become more of a diversity of things. You also have a range of interests, including solid waste and the City Beautiful efforts and stuff. I mean, when we were talking on the phone to prepare for the program, you tied in a number of things.
I get so excited about the thought of those buildings and all the impervious surface that we have there being recycled. And when we do make a park there, or a buildings, a community center, a longhouse, whatever the vision ends up being, that we build green. Thurston County and Olympia, the citizens are very interested and very supportive in doing things better and in preserving our environment. And so this could be a signature project for just all sorts of things.
Right. And with that, then that can generate support from other constituencies that would rather have green things than asphalt flat roofs.
Right, we can address all sorts of things in the planning process. Sea level rise, storm water runoff. It just really is an exciting, it can be a model that Olympia can be very proud of.
It's the kind of thing that just lends itself so well to the creativity that people in this community have about how to make this community even more joyous.
And that's one of our biggest assets, is the creative community here.
Let's talk for a bit about the organization that all three of you are active with, the Olympia Capital Park Foundation. You had mentioned something about the origins of this, Jerry. What else can you tell us? And all three of you are on the board, and there are presumably more board members than.
Well, a couple of points to make. Back in the late summer and fall of 2008, when the Isthmus Park Association formed to follow up on the great work of the Friends of the Waterfront, its purpose was to deal with the public policy debate, the initiative petition, and so forth. We also saw the need at the same time to create a 501c3 nonprofit that could raise funds. And the foundation was formed to do that, and it can raise funds that are tax deductible for federal tax purposes, provided they're used for the purposes of the foundation, which are essentially the acquisition operation of open space. And so the foundation at the outset was sort of the baby brother the baby sister of the Isthmus Park Association. And over time, as the Isthmus Park Association achieved its objectives and was successful in those objectives, it has receded, and the foundation has become the primary organization, although the association still exists for some other technical purposes. If we have to challenge land use proposals and we have to take legal action, things like that, we have that. So the foundation has been raising funds, has successfully raised well over $100,000, really among friends, just by asking, nothing really, no big fundraising effort, but was done to give us the capital to be credible to begin this process. Sometimes you have to pay for an assessment, sometimes you have to pay for fees and so forth. So we've done that, and that's the role the foundation has been played. And we have a membership now of over 300 people in the community. So it's a place where people can come and be part of the organization. And that grows weekly.
You have a good website that lays out your history and the vision and some more stuff, and that's www.olycapitalparkfoundation.org, and that's capital with the O-L, like the building.
Correct.
So O-L-Y capitalparkfoundation.org, and then the group uses your phone number, 561-4212.
Correct.
And I know that works because I've called it.
and we suggest that people take a look at that website. It's a wonderful website, all volunteers, as everything we do, all volunteers. And we maintain it. It's very current. It has major milestones. It has news stories. It has our vision. It lays out pretty thoroughly what we would like to accomplish.
Yeah, it's a clean look to it and very functional. You can find just what you want.
Yes, our webmaster is Thad Kurtz. I'll give him a plug.
Okay, good. Yeah,
some people
Thad's a
may
good
know
guy.
Thad. He's a genius.
Yes, he's very good. What else can you tell us about recent and current efforts of the organization?
Well, the most recent exciting event was that we were successful in competing for a Conservation Futures grant from Thurston County.
And that was a $600,000.
$600,000, and they awarded it contingent upon our ability to raise another $1 million within a year, and then another $1 million or so within 2 years for the first part of land acquisition. But what was so significant about this is the first investment of public funds in the park, and that support from the county is worth far more than the $600,000 in terms of credibility with other actors and our ability to go to other foundations, other funders with the credibility of having that in the bank.
Right. So there's some leverage there,
Yes.
as well as having, what did you say, 300 members?
We have at least 300
Okay.
members right now of the foundation, and but the first public investment in this park will be remembered for a long time.
Okay, great. And so what are the next steps?
The next steps are to negotiate, work with the landowners, and this has been going on now, both with the owners of the Capitol Center building and with the owners of what we call the West Parcels or the Triway Corporation. And there have been ongoing discussions with the West Parcels and Triway that's been somewhat complicated by the bankruptcy and the foreclosure situation. But it's to find the ways and means, first of all, to have a meeting of the minds about the satisfactory price, and then the ways and means to finance that. And that will be some combination of we hope, the city, the county, private philanthropy, and the expertise and resources of the Trust for Public Land, certainly in the first part of the land acquisition, and then probably the state of Washington in the second part of the land acquisition.
Okay. So I think the public, at least everybody that I know, was thrilled when the the big condominium development, the Loretta Passage thing, got stopped. But people need to know that that doesn't mean that we've won what we need to accomplish, that there's all this ongoing work.
Well, number one, understand that that is not stopped.
Right, because the bankruptcy.
Well, the people who own that property would argue that they still have the right to proceed under the zoning that was in place at the time.
That's right, okay.
Now, others may dispute that, but that would be the argument from their perspective, and they would also therefore argue that the land has value that reflects that potential use. There was a window of time when what they applied for was permitted, and they would argue that they are vested.
And they've still been maintaining that argument then?
Yeah, and we disagree with that argument, but conceivably they could prevail.
Yeah.
I don't think it's likely, but they could. People need to understand that. So Loretta is not, the only way to make sure that it's done is we have to own the land.
Okay.
We have to move that land into public ownership, foundation ownership. Then we can say with certainty that that project will never happen.
Okay. But you are working with all of the various parties as appropriate to move this ahead. And the more money would be needed beyond the land acquisition to be able to take down those buildings and put up a green space with some benches, and then be able to proceed with the later.
Correct. And we think to do this first phase is going to be somewhere between $16 and $22 million, which is an enormous amount of money, but in the scale of things, we think is achievable. And also, when you put it in the context of there already has been about a $40 million public investment, Heritage Park, Percival Landing, the West Side Park, Priest Point Park way back, that 50 years from now, we'll look back and we'll say it was a wonder that they accomplished that for that level of resource. And it will be the legacy project of this generation of Olympians.
Yeah, it will. You don't want to leave that couple blocks of blight in amidst all the rest of this. I mean, it's like a gem, you know, in that nice setting, and it's
exactly.
So, how could viewers get more information? We've mentioned the website, the olycapitalparkfoundation.org, and the phone 561-4212. Are you anticipating public events, public opportunities, or is this mostly organizational work?
Once we have control of some of the land, or part of the land, I think then you're more likely to see some specific public events around that, to both to inform the community about that and to ask for their help.
So, and in the meantime, we do appear at community events, Wooden Boat Festival, those kinds of things.
Yeah, the Harbor Days and so forth.
That kind of thing.
Those kinds of things. And then people can still join through the website. People
Absolutely. People join every week.
Financial support.
I mentioned to you before, one of the great things about this is we have all kinds of people who help us and we don't know it. We just have people who pop up and do wonderful things. Like one gentleman, Larry Freitag in town, donated the entire proceeds of this wonderful calendar he puts out every year with a panoramic view of the Capitol and the downtown harbor. And he began last year by donating some copies of that to us for us to use. This year he donated the entire calendar to us with totally his idea. We have people who do wonderful things for us all the time. I have somebody who once sent me an envelope full of stamps in case postage would be helpful in our effort. And these kind of things happen all the time.
Yeah. There's, you mentioned earlier the Trust for Public Land, and that's actually a nationwide group based in San Francisco, and they're interested. And what is it that interests them in this?
They see the great potentiality of this site. They see it as one of the great vistas in America. These are the people who are working to preserve the Hollywood sign in California. They're the people who put the land together for the Sculpture Park in Seattle with the Seattle Art Museum. And they've traditionally focused on thousands of acres in Montana and rural preservation and so forth, but they have a new focus now that's parks for people, parks for places for people. And we fit into that new, or that refocus of their mission, and they're extremely excited about this site. We've had many people from that organization come through with us and work with us, and they're a great partner.
Okay, so the more we can generate local energy around this, the more we can leverage, because I know those kinds of sources need to make sure that they're supporting something that the local people actually want. And so we need to demonstrate a fervent desire from here.
They are excited about what we've been able to do here, and they're going to be very challenging of us in asking us to assemble resources in this Thurston County community toward the park. But they're willing to work with us and provide their great expertise, and they have a statewide and a national donor community who cares about projects such as this.
How could people help besides visiting the website and getting informed? What else could people do to generate support or in whatever ways?
Talk about it with their friends.
Engage in public process and go down and view the site. And
the first step is go to the website. The second step is let us know that they would like to be a member and be on the mail list, so that we can make volunteer opportunities available to them, and so that we can inform them of major developments. And they also need to talk with their local elected officials and let them know that they share our passion for making this the legacy project of this generation.
Yeah, I appreciate getting the emails from you about this. The emails come once in a while when there's some news, so it's not like I'm being spammed. I mean, it's always,
that's an important point,
newsworthy stuff. So if I get something from you, I'd be sure to read it.
We try to keep them brief.
Yeah.
And we're trying to keep them brief, and we generally only do them when we have something significant to report.
That's what I've noticed. So as a result, when I get an email from you, I read it.
Good, thank you.
So that works. So I encourage other folks to do likewise. It would be something to have a range of people, I'm thinking like age range, for these kinds of civic projects, as usually people who are middle-aged or older who work on it. When you think about a park, I think about, people of all ages enjoying the park, including people in their 20s, 30s, 40s, people with kids, everybody. And I'd like to be able to see more age range, more age diversity in this.
Are you saying we're old folks here?
I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying what happens with civic projects is...
You have 3 of the older board members. We have.
I
hear what you're
saying.
Good.
No, 2 of the older board members. No, we have lots of younger people.
That's good.
Lots of younger people who are members. We have some younger people who are on the board. And when we do these civic events, such as Harbor Days and Sand in the City, we get a lot of interest from younger people.
Okay, good.
We get a lot of people with kids, and they're just real excited about this.
Yeah, because it just seems like a natural. Some kinds of issues will appeal to one demographic or another, and this just seems like something that would have broad public support. So that's good to know. Could we get a closing thought from each person? A brief closing thought in any sequence.
Well, I think about when I came to town in 1974. This building was 9 years old, and the Capitol Center building is the big focus of this, getting rid of it. It was only 9 years old, and everybody hated it already. I mean, everybody hated it. I've been here 37 years. I have not heard a single person in 37 years say, that is a great building and it really belongs right in that place. It's incredible. I mean, this is something the community wants gone and opened up.
Great.
And I don't think I can't imagine, I've been involved in a lot of projects. I can't imagine a project that would have more community support than this one.
Great. Thank you, Bob.
Start dreaming. And join the effort.
Yeah. Great, thank you. Jerry?
Bob's button there says Isthmus Park, leave a legacy. That is the opportunity here. This can be our legacy gift, this generation's gift. Some of us, except for Sarah, are a little bit older, but we can give this to our children and our grandchildren.
Great. Well, thanks. I want to thank Jerry and Sarah and Bob. I want to thank all the folks who've been watching. The isthmus that connects downtown Olympia with West Olympia really is a perfect place for a public park. The views are stunning, both from that area to the Capitol and from the Capitol down through that area and out to the Olympics. It's possibly the most precious gem that could be envisioned in this beautiful setting around it. And it's really an area of statewide and national significance. And I appreciate the work that the Olympia Capitol Park Foundation is doing to create a park that all of us can enjoy. For information about a wide variety of issues that relate to peace, social justice, and nonviolence, you can contact the Olympia Fellowship of Reconciliation at 491-9093 or www.olympiafor.org. If you happen to be watching this program on TCTV during September on a Thursday night, stay tuned for our Big Picture documentary series, which starts at 10 p.m. immediately following this. And this month's documentary is about Juan Melendez, who spent almost 18 years on death row in Florida, and he was completely innocent. It's a fascinating story. It's worth watching. And the Olympia Fellowship of Reconciliation will bring Juan Melendez to Olympia to speak at the United Churches, 110 11th Avenue Southeast, on Friday evening, September 30th at 7 p.m. So that's a compelling opportunity to hear this amazing person speak. We're all one human family, and we all share one planet. We can create a better world, but we all have to work at it, and the world needs what you have to offer. Thanks. The program focuses on that, and we have 3 members of the board of the Olympia Capitol Park Foundation. I'm happy to welcome our 3 guests, Jerry Riley, Sarah Siegel, and Bob Jacobs. Good to have you all here.
Thank you.
We will explore this topic, and I hope that the viewers will be as enthusiastic about this as the 4 of us are. Jerry, let's start the conversation by looking at the area that we're talking about. We've got a photo showing the location with the current buildings, and then we'll look after that at another photo without those buildings, another image. Tell us about the 2 images. We have over here.
Well, the first image we're going to look at is the Isthmus area as it exists today, with the Capitol Center building in the center of it, which is a 9-story building that was constructed in 1965 and has come to be known by many people in the community as the Mistake by the Lake. The second image we're going to see would show us what this area would look like if the Capitol Center building were removed.
Okay, and the areas that we're talking about are a park that would extend from...
This is not the first time an idea had been proposed similar to that, and there were a lot of people in the community concerned. About 7 people came together one morning in the Bud Bay Cafe who were all former members of the Olympia Planning Commission and said, we're concerned about this, what can we do? But rather than simply say, well, we're going to oppose the high-rise condominiums as being inappropriate for that space, we said, let's come up with a permanent solution and a better solution. which is to be for something. And what we were for was the idea of creating a great civic space on the Isthmus.
Yeah, that's like I said at the introduction of the program, that just always seemed like that's where that space is crying out to be, is because of the beautiful setting there. And there had been other proposals to build there before.
Yes, there had been earlier proposals, and generally the community would rise up and say, we don't think this is a good idea, and the city council concurred with that point of view, and the proposals never went forward. What was different this time is it appeared that a majority of the council seemed very firm in their belief that this was the right thing to do. And they thought it was important to do this to get housing, market rate housing in downtown Olympia to help downtown. What happened here was under the leadership of the Friends of the Waterfront.
The Heritage Park fountain, which is between 4th and 5th Avenues, and then the bridges on 4th and 5th Avenue, so that area west, not including the building that has Traditions Cafe in it, but it's Heritage Fountain and to the west, and between 4th and 5th.
We're talking about the area between the Heritage Fountain and the Deschutes Spillway, and between 4th and 5th. Yeah. And in the next image, you can see what the area would look like with the Capitol Center building and most of the other buildings removed from that area.
Okay. We've had a controversy in this community recently about a proposal to build 90-foot tall condominiums and commercial buildings on the Isthmus. City Council had decided to rezone the area to allow that, and then the community and the voters responded by replacing some of those city council members. What else can you tell us about that ill-fated proposal in the context of the potential?
Well, in 2008, a proposal was laid in front of the city to create high-rise condominiums on the Isthmus, approximately at the same site of size of the Capitol Center building, but at much greater mass, to really completely fill the two blocks west of the Capitol Center to the Deschutes Spillway.
Welcome. I'm Glenn Anderson with the Olympia Fellowship of Reconciliation. This TV series explores a variety of issues that relate to peace, social justice, and nonviolent social change. I've lived in this local community since January 1975, and to me, the isthmus that connects downtown Olympia and West Olympia has always seemed to be a waste when office buildings clog its natural beauty and the natural space. The location has just been crying out to be a public park. Located between Capitol Lake and Bud Inlet, the southernmost tip of Puget Sound, with views of the state capitol building and the Olympic Mountains, Olympia's Isthmus would be a natural place for people to gather and enjoy the beauty and build our sense of community. The Isthmus has always felt to me that it has wanted to be a natural gathering place for our community, a public park that we could all enjoy. Fortunately, our community includes a lot of people who believe, as I do, and are actually working to bring this dream into reality. The Olympia Capital Park Foundation is working for exactly that. This month's TV